think that pretty much covers, the essential points that we discussed last week. So here's a quick recap. We are in this body. We are not, but not this body. We are beyond. We are beyond the body. We are not the body. We are not the mind, but we are something beyond both the body and the mind. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yantra Rudani Maya. So he says, Ishvara Sarva Bhutani, Hrideshu Arjuna Tishtati, Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani, Yantra Rudani Maya. So he says that this body is a sophisticated machine made of the material energy, and then it's a yantra, highly sophisticated machine, and then we are seated in this body, and like a car to a driver. And then because of the presence of the conscious living entity in the body appears to be alive. So our real identity is that we are Atma, spirit. And then we talked about the difference between Atma and the material body. So one difference was that the Atma is, the conscious force is eternal, but the body is temporary. And any other differences that you can think about? Okay, the body is affected by the material elements. The Atma is beyond it because it's spiritual in nature. But of course, the Atma identifies with all the changes in environment, everything, because it closely identifies or misidentifies with the body and treats the body as a self. So anything that happens to the body, it feels that it's happening to the true self, which is right. And the other difference is that Atma by nature is immortal, and then it's also full of bliss. It's called Sanskrit term, it's called Ananda. So it's full of bliss, but the body is actually a source of, what is that? Pain. Yeah. It's certainly not a source of everlasting, bliss. It's a source of, at least we can say it's a mixed bag, and more so, as you get older, you can know the body gives more and more trouble than any sense of happiness, so-called happiness in the material world. And we didn't really talk about the suggestive evidences, but we just briefly touched upon near-death experiences and then out-of-body experiences, and then we talked about the professors who had done research in those fields and briefly mentioned about it. And then, so today we will talk about the inner engineering. There is a world inside. It's a complex mechanism that's actually the Atma has to deal with, and we will dive deep into what are those different components inside. How are decisions made? What is the mind? What is the intelligent? And then what are the different interaction? How the interaction happens between the mind, intelligence, etc. So we will go deeper into how things work inside us. So this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita: that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible, because it's talking about the Atma. So this is the anatomy of our identity. We had this picture last week. So we have a multi-dimensional existence. We have a spiritual entity, the Atma. We are the spiritual entity, the Atma, and we have two coverings: the subtle body and the gross body. So gross body is made of the 5 gross elements. Anybody remember what are those? Right. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So these are the 5 gross elements, and whatever form that we see, each other, we have a gross form, and it's made of these 5 elements. So that's comes under the category of the gross body. And then there is one more body, like how you have a shirt and a coat. So similarly, there is the Atma has 2 coverings. So there is also something called a subtle body. The subtle body is made of, any guesses? The elements of the subtle body. No. Yeah, it's mind. Mind is one of the elements of the subtle body. Intelligence is another element. And then third one is ahankar. This is my car. It's false ego. So these are the 3 elements of the subtle body: the mind, intelligence, and false ego. In fact, Krishna says these 8 elements, so 5 gross, 3 subtle, these 8 elements combined together, it forms the material energy. So Krishna says, Bhumir apo analo vayu kam mano buddhir evacha ahankara iti yame binna prakriti ashana. These are the separated material energies. He says, my energy, my separated energy. So put together they form 8 energies. Because we saw this example last week. We also saw the difference between the body and the Atma last week. And now we will. So this is the different, the comparison between the gross and the subtle body. So it's made of the 5 elements. Subtle body is made of the 3 elements. So the gross body, what happens to the gross body at death? Disintegrates, right? Of course, we go to the samshan and burn it, and it disintegrates. Of course, people with other customs, they do other things, but it basically disintegrates back into the 5 elements, 5 gross elements. But then, what happens to the subtle body? I mean, you can just know this point, know these points for now. We will come back again to discuss all these things more in detail. The subtle body doesn't wither or disintegrate at the time of death. The subtle body remains at the time of death. So death is a point when actually the gross body disintegrates. But what happens to the subtle body? The subtle body still remains intact. So Krishna gives a beautiful example. He says how air carries an aroma. How air carries aroma, similarly, the subtle body carries the Atma to its next destination. So the subtle body is still there even after death. And the gross body spans for one lifetime. But the subtle body spans for multiple lifetimes. These are some of the points you can note, but we'll come back discuss more.
Prabhu, is it a bridge between the gross body to the next birth, the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, it carries up to there and then it stops? Because we can't be carrying the past generation memories through intelligence or mind, otherwise the life will become so more miserable.
Yeah, that's true. So that's why, did everybody get his question?
Yes.
What his question was? That if the mind, if you have the same subtle body or so many journeys of the Atma or so many lifetimes, then wouldn't we not remember all the different past lives and so on and so forth? Well, what Bhagavad Gita talks about is that all the experiences are stored in the mind. Of course, we will talk about it when we come to the section of the mind. Just to give you a brief answer, all the different experiences are collected, and stored in the subconscious mind. But the laws of nature is such that one, because the living entity has to live fully in one's life in the present condition and present body, the experiences to the past lives and the details are put in access denied mode. So that is nature's arrangement, so that there can be some sanity by which the living entity can be fully living one's life in the present condition and the present body. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's removed, but it's just that it's stored the experiences and it's called a psyche. So the subtle body, you can also term it as psyche. So, but one's impressions and one's habits and conditioning are carried over, but the details are kept, in a secret folder, which is kind of not given access to by nature's arrangement. This is how the setup is. In fact, the last session we were talking about how Dr. Ian Stevenson, he recorded more than 2,000 cases of past life memory. So past life. So in fact, we will see a video at the end actually where there was a video in ABC channel about how a child actually regresses into past life and it starts getting all these different visions and details about his past life, and of course it was very conflicting. But then Dr. Ian Stevenson also notes that when the child grows up and comes to a certain age, then he starts forgetting everything. And of course it doesn't happen with everyone. It happens with only certain. So he recorded over 2,000 cases, like this. So, what was I getting to? Right. So, generally, all the details are hidden for us in the present life, but due to some exceptional cases, especially when you are a child, then some of the children can get these past life memories, back up, and can come to the forefront, and then they can go through a lot of turmoil actually, in the sense that they can experience different things from the past life. So that is how the nature's arrangements are. And to just answer your question. So another way we can actually look at this is in our modern day in the IT world. I mean, everybody can relate to this in the area. So there is a user who's actually working on a computer which runs a software. The software is run on a hardware. Now tell me, which corresponds to what? How can you compare this to the Gita's anatomy of the body or our existence?
Hardware is like gross body.
Okay, he's saying hardware is like gross body. Everybody agree? Yeah? What is that?
Software is
What is that? Okay, let's take one point at a time. He said he equated hardware to the gross body. Is that excuse me. Is that true or not? What do you think? It's true? Come on, man. He just bailed out. Actually, that's correct. Hardware is equated to the gross body. So, because let's say the hardware dies, right? Can the software and the user exist still? Yes. The software and the user can exist still. So similarly, when the gross body withers away or disintegrates, the subtle body and the Atma exists. And of course, the remaining one is, what about software and the user? Software represented by the subtle body. So, and the user is the Atma. The Atma is to exist. The Atma is not dependent on the subtle or the gross body, but it's the other way around. For the gross body and the subtle body to function, it has to have the living force inside it. That's what powers these highly sophisticated machines, as Krishna says. So the presence, the living force is what powers it. So now, what do you think? Can you tell me with the same example and correlate it with what happens at death? But use this example and tell me. Hardware dies.
Software is obsolete.
Software is obsolete. Exactly. So, what happens at the time of death is the gross body disintegrates, but you can have backup of the software. If you have the backup of the software and you know the state of the software or how the software is, stored, then you can actually get a new hardware and boot it up, and the whole thing will just come up. And then the user can operate on the new hardware as if he was operating on the old one. It was just a difference of the hardware. Actually, it's very close to what happens. The concept that we are describing here is exactly how transmigration also happens, or what they call reincarnation also happens. Is that our mind, our subtle body is like a state machine. You have built a state or conditioned it in a certain way, and you've built a state over a period of life, over a period of your lifetime. You build a state, and that state machine is basically backed up in your subconscious mind, or your mind, stored in your mind. And when the gross body disintegrates, then according to this configuration here, your state here, a new hardware is given to you. Of course, here we give the same hardware probably. If it's a Mac computer, you give the same. Maybe it's an upgraded version of the Mac computer you give. But the nature's arrangement is much more complex and much more fine-tuned. So depending on the state of the mind, a new hardware is given to you. A completely new hardware is given to you, on which you can actually run your software, and then the Atma can continue its journey, like that.
New hardware and the amount of money you have.
Right.
So does the form of the hardware change as from human form to different form? And
Yeah,
what is that?
that's something that we will discuss further in the slides. But just to give you, yes. So according to the Bhagavad Gita, that's why I said it's not the same kind of hardware. According to the Vedas, there are 8.4 million species of life, just very close to what science is trying to find. The species of life actually, which is beyond the human species. So you can, according to the state of the mind, and according to one's karma, a particular hardware is given to, is afforded actually. It's given by the nature. So it's defined by the state and the purpose and one's karma actually. Anyway, we'll come to that point as we move on. And that's why human form of life is a junction. So you can it's a junction in the sense you can, if you use it wisely, you can go up. If you misuse it, which we can see, so many examples, you can really go down. So, so it's up to us that we use a human form of life, in the way that it's meant to be used, in a wise way. Yes.
See, if we relate this example to body and soul, can we say that subtle body is one of the reasons that same kids of the same family are completely opposite sometimes, or maybe different from each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's psyche, right? Subtle body. Subtle body defines what kind of a person one is. So depending on the subtle body, even though so the mind's nature is defined by, of course, there is much more details to this.
Right.
But in short, yes, the kids from the same family, even though they may have the same upbringing, same environment, they may just grow up to be two different persons because of the proclivities and the inclinations that they have and the different mindset that they can have, the mental state they can have. Yeah, go ahead.
What happens when an Atma is like, it has accumulated a lot of intelligence or powers with both?
It carries over. So whatever you have accumulated in your mental state or the mental system, then it gets carried over. It's very interesting, right? Anyway, I'll have to give you an example to understand it better. Like, for example, whenever you perform an action, there are two things that happens. What do you think are the two things that happens? There is a reaction. Basically, when you perform an action, the world reacts to it, right? When I say world, another person reacts to it, or multiple people react to it. So there is a reaction that comes, and then what else happens? Huh?
Within ourselves, we have a reaction to it.
Yeah. Yes, you're close.
Leaves an impression.
Yeah, it puts an impression in your mental system. So that's what conditioning means. How does one become, a chain smoker or an alcoholic? The way it happens is, the first time when they do it, they kind of repulse at the activity. But then third time, fourth time, fifth time, and then nth time, suddenly they have conditioned their mind to accept those substances. And then it progresses over a period of time. Then the conditioning becomes so strong that it consumes one's life. It can consume one's life. So that's how conditioning happens. The more we invest time in a certain activity or in a certain thing, then we are conditioning our mind to be tuned to that particular activity. Ultimately that's what is called habit. Habit, right? It starts, they say that when you remove H from habit, there is still a bit. And then you remove A from, you remove H and A, there is still bit. And then, so habits are very easy, habits you can get into it easily, but then to break a habit, it's going to be challenging. But how do you form the habit? You continue to invest in a certain activity or a certain thing over and over again. And then your mind becomes conditioned to it, and there is an impression, and then there is a certain conditioning to it. Like, for example, you're a short-tempered person. You give in to your anger very easily, or you become angry very easily. Then if that is your mental state, then that's what you'll carry over to your next life. So the person will be born in Rudra avatar, actually. So we are all born with a certain set of proclivity. How there are child prodigies? Think about it. A child, who is just 6 years old, 7 years old, just picks on a piano just like that overnight, or somebody picks on a tabla just like that, or somebody just, they just feel that, I'm familiar with this, right? So there are prodigies. How? Because they have done it in their previous life. So that psyche is there, that conditioning is there. So when they come in contact with it again, they immediately pick it up, and then so it goes for both good and bad things, and it goes also for spiritual things. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one who is spiritually inclined in the previous life, when he meets people who have spiritual nature or sees books, or it immediately awakens his interest for spiritual subject matters. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, at a given point in time, the hardware, software, and user, is there like a one-to-one-to-one mapping? Which meaning...
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. At any given time, it's one-to-one mapping, yes. But the mapping can change. But it's always one-to-one. I mean, that's
for a lifetime, or like...
For a lifetime, it's one-to-one. After lifetime also, it's one-to-one. It's just a different body, gross body. But this mapping is always one-to-one. This one keeps changing.
Prabhuji, may I add something to what you said? The subtle body gathers experience from the gross body, and after the subtle gross body dies, subtle body is supposed to carry it. Carry it till the next birth. Now, in the next birth, actually, the life struggle to survive is so difficult for a newborn that it forgets older memories and tries to gather the new ones. I mean, that's. But in rare cases, I will tell you the example of some stories in the book. I mean, they.
It comes back.
Retell the story. I don't know whether I'm right or not.
Yes.
So I think, in other words, the pathways are created. You don't need a memory. Your ways are already created. You'll just follow those ways. You don't need a memory to follow those.
Right.
The behavior is implanted.
Yes.
The follow-up question was, how much of this is hereditary versus can it transcend, like people who are like different races, different countries?
Sorry? I didn't get the question.
You talked about the subtle body. Let's say it moves from one person to another. Is it more within the family?
Well, it depends actually. It depends on the... I mean, you can be born in a family, but you can not be attached to anybody in the family. You can be attached to Sachin Tendulkar, for all that matters. So, I mean, nowadays it's so different. It can be so random actually, because ultimately your next I mean, you can remember this point. Your next destination is determined by the state of your mental state at the time of death, which has accumulated over a period of your life. So your next destination is depending on your mental state, and it can be your mental state. It can be anything, especially in the modern world. I mean, you can live with your family physically, but you can be mentally absorbed, somewhere else. And that's the power of the mind. That is the real power of the mind. There was one story. I mean, I vaguely remember the details, but there were two monks actually, and they were trying to cross a river, and then there was one lady who actually wanted help to get onto a boat, which was on the banks of the river. So one of the monks, of course, monks, there are some restrictions, and there are some, how they deal with the women. So, but one of the monks actually, being compassionate, he actually, helped the lady to actually get onto the boat. I mean, he helped her, catching her hand and helped her get on the boat. So both the monks were actually crossing the river after that. And then from one side of the bank to the other side of the bank, the other monk was actually, he felt a little disturbed. And then when they crossed the bank, the other monk asked him, I mean, how can you, do this? That, there are some, supposed to be rules and regulations and so on and so forth. Then this monk replies that actually I only, dealt with the woman for a few seconds when I helped her get on the boat. But now you have carried, in your mind for an hour, as much as we were crossing, from one side of the bank to the other side of the bank. So mind, mind is a very powerful entity actually. It's in fact the Bhagavatam says that mind has fearsome godlike powers. Do you agree? Yeah. Yeah, we agree. Especially if you have tried to practice meditation, you surely agree that mind has such powers actually. And in fact, Arjuna goes on to say that Krishna, it's easier to control the raging wind, but I don't think I will be able to control the mind. That's the comparison he gives in the Bhagavad Gita. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna paramati balavantrita tasyaham nigraham manye vayor eva shadushkaram. He says his mind is so difficult to control. It's it's obstinate, it's flickering, it's restless, and it's so difficult to control that it's even more difficult than controlling a raging wind. That's what Arjuna says. So, yeah, so now we will get into right. So what is the mind and what is the intelligence and what is the false ego? These are the subtle elements. Of course, let's do an exercise. You can close your eyes. Don't think about the red apple. Don't think about the red apple. You can open your eyes now. What was your experience? Red apple. In fact, when I was telling the statement, only red apple flashed in my mind. What other experience?
I imagine all apples out of red color, orange, red, yellow, orange, yellow, black, purple, and banana.
I tried to derivate from red, then it's green apple.
Okay.
So when you said red apple, I was trying to think about the cake.
Okay. Any other?
Mind is the most indisciplined part of the system.
Stubborn. Krishna says yes, indisciplined, stubborn. Any other points? Any other?
I felt it was overpowering me. Like even though I'm seeing, like, don't think about it, it goes back. Like, no, you are going to see like apple in front of you. So that's how I felt. It was like overpowering.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's why, I mean, this just gives you, an insight into the statement from Bhagavatam that mind has fearsome godlike powers. It has a lot of power. It has a lot of power over our existence, over Atma. So mind, also you can, it is a storehouse of all information, experiences, emotions, desires. So the Atma has had so many journeys. The mind is the repository of all these different things, of experiences, of emotions, that's why you can see sometimes people, certain things can trigger certain people, because they have had those past experiences. So it's a storehouse of emotions, experiences, and desires. And the mind is also compared to a movie screen. How on a movie screen, there are so many flashes of images that comes and goes, and then you can see all those flashes of images coming and going, And then sometimes, while seeing a movie, we get so much drawn into the movie that we also, the hero cries, we also cry. And then, whatever the emotions are enacted by the characters in the movie, we also start getting affected by it. So the mind is exactly like a movie screen where all the different thoughts and stories and all the imaginations, all those things are projected. And we can latch on to any of those and we're in for a ride, a big ride. So that's what, that's one of the, these are some of the functions of the mind. One more point I wanted to stress was that there are, so many thousands of thoughts that actually come into the mental system, and any thought can actually carry us away, and we can lose focus. That's one of the functions of the mind, is to be restless, is to be stubborn, restless, and chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavat dhritam. And pramati means strong. It's also very, very strong. So the mind has a mind of its own, and it can make heaven out of hell and hell out of heaven. In fact, there is a very interesting acronym of the mind. That's one of my friends shared. Very nice. M stands for magnifies problems. Have you experienced this?
Yeah.
Of course, right? In fact, we would be thinking so many things, and then you go and communicate with the person, and then it would turn out to be like, there is no issues at all, right? So one of the things that the mind does is magnifies problems. Something that doesn't even exist, it will just create this illusory story, and then it will get us entangled in that, and we'll be so caught up in that we will think that tomorrow the whole world is going to blow up. That is how much serious the problem is. But then actually, in reality, there is not even an iota of a problem there. So mind magnifies problems. The second one, for I, it imagines pleasure. So it's, we follow the mind's dictations, and many times it says, oh, there is pleasure here, there is pleasure there. And many times what we do is we go and try to experience those things, but always it falls short for the ananda that the Atma wants. It always falls short of the ananda that we want to experience. So the mind imagines, like for example, movie, right? I'm sure everybody has seen movies here. How is your feeling when you're just about to go to a movie? What is that? Excited, right? And then how is your experience when the movie is over? It's gone. Depends on the movie. Depends on the movie. I mean, there is some truth to that actually. But then, generally our experience is, the excitement is gone. It's over. In fact, Krishna says this happiness in the mode of passion. He says, what starts as nectar but ends as a dud. He says as happiness in the mode of passion. Actually, it looks like there is happiness there. There is some sensory experience, and we do experience something. But ultimately, at the end of everything, our hearts don't feel satisfied. We have to go and do something else to feel that satisfaction again. So what tricks us that there is, ananda there that we want to experience? That's one of the functions of the mind, is to imagine pleasure. And the third one is neglects reality. And I mean, we can see in our day-to-day life, we may be assuming and living in our own world, and suddenly, reality strikes. We may be in denial of many things, but then reality strikes. Like that story, right? Where the boy, he calls out for, he calls lies, right? There's a tiger, and then suddenly the tiger comes, and then there's nobody to, right? So it makes us out of touch with reality, neglects reality. And the fourth is denies opportunity. There can be many opportunities present before us. It completely twists everything and makes us, even reversals can be opportunity. But then, because of the perception that we have and the mind has such control over us, then we can lose opportunities. So this is a very nice acronym that one of my friends shared. M stands for magnifies problems. I stands for imagines pleasure. N stands for neglects reality. Wow, you're like. And D stands for denies opportunity. Right. So this is the mind, and the function of the mind can be summarized into thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, and then feeling, and then finally willing. So this goes on in a cyclical fashion. So you start with the contemplation. I mean, if you're attracted to an object, a thought comes into your mind, or you see an ad, or you see a billboard, or it's something like that. Then there's a thought that comes into your mental system. So it starts with thinking, contemplation, and then you contemplate. Oh, if it was in my hand, it would be so nice. If it was, if I drive on that, it will be so nice. So there can be, so many thoughts that can be generated when. So it starts with thinking, and then there is suddenly this start of attachment that one develops. Oh, it will be nice if I have it. And then there is intensification of that attachment, which leads to that I want to own it. And then finally, it goes to willing. Yes, I'll do whatever it takes to get it. So it's progressive in the sense it starts from thinking, feeling, and willing, like that. This is the words. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong of Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. I mean, in those days, they were able to control the wind using mantras. So that's why he compares it to controlling the wind. What's that?
Atma wanted that desperately. If they could control the winds.
And then the second component is intelligence. So intelligence is hierarchy above the mind. So the mind is a storehouse of all these emotions and past experiences, and the intelligence is a discriminating faculty. So it guides, based on the knowledge we have, it guides whether something is right or wrong. Right? Of course, intelligence is, it can be less known because it's hardly used. But intelligence gives the discriminating, faculty. It is a discriminating faculty. It gives us the ability to discriminate between what is right and what's wrong actually. So which is more powerful, intelligence or the mind?
Mind. Intelligence should be.
Right. There is always a tug of war. There is always, a battle between intelligence and the mind. And sometimes, when one is determined and one has especially one is equipped with knowledge, I mean, we will come to those verses, then one can actually overcome the mind, the effects of the mind. But many times, The intelligence is just like slapped. And then the mind vetoes all suggestions of the thing, and then it goes, in its own direction. Yeah.
So all the judgments, they come from intelligence?
Well, it weighs and gives you different options and tells you what's bad and what's good. But then if it's an overpowering desire, then one can still go ahead with, like for example, somebody is diabetic, right? And then unfortunately he is also conditioned to being attached to sweets, right? There's always, so whenever he sees sweets, then he, pauses, and then there's an internal battle going on. What should I do now? Right? The intelligence says, don't eat, because intelligence has the knowledge that if you eat, it will be not healthy for you. But then the mind says, let's, we want that experience. Forget it. One time nothing will happen. What will happen? And then that's how mind tries to convince. And then if the mind is powerful, if the intelligence is not, empowered, it's not equipped with the right kind of knowledge, and one has to have willpower also. There's two things. Intelligence alone cannot, intelligence will give you way and give you choices, but then it has to come from the Atma, the willpower, which is coming from the Atma. It has to override the mind's influence, but if the willpower is weak, then the mind just takes over, and then everybody goes along the mind's direction. So that's how internally, this is what is the framework? This is what's happening inside us. This is the framework that Krishna is talking about. This is the decision. These are the two important components of the decision-making framework, actually. And then there is false ego. False ego is the element, the subtle element, which actually binds us or helps us to misidentify with the body. Misidentify with misconceptions about ourselves. Oh, I'm great, I'm beautiful, I'm I can control everything, I can deal with everything, I'm the center of the universe, I can control everything. So all these different misconceptions that we have about ourselves, it comes from false ego. I'm the proprietor, I'm the enjoyer, and all these things are false conceptions. Yeah, he's an old man, but he sees himself as a very young person. It gives a wrong image of ourselves, the false ego. So the interaction of the Atma with the body. So this is another beautiful example that's given in the Upanishad. It gives an example of a chariot. And then it talks about, giving this example of a chariot, it discusses about how all these interactions happen. So what do you think the horses represent?
Senses.
Five senses.
5 senses.
Indriyas.
Yes, the indriyas. The knowledge acquiring senses, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, the sense of the tongue, ears, all these, the 5 senses. Who's the passenger?
Mind.
So, the Atma. The Atma is the passenger. You can see he's bewildered, right? So you can easily find out that is the Atma. That's what people's lives are. They're bewildered actually. They are frustrated, they are bewildered because they just don't know why life is supposed to give them satisfaction, but they are depressed, they are dissatisfied. Unruly mind is just ruining. Unruly mind and senses are just ruining their lives. And then what is the rain? The rain is what controls all the senses? Or where does all the inputs of the senses go to? The mind. The rain represents the mind. And then who's the driver?
Buddhi, intelligence.
Yeah, the intelligence is the driver. And of course the passenger is we, the real self. Now, when the self and the intelligent are not in control, what happens? the senses look at, they are looking at all the things, and then they are pulling, and in directions, and then the mind actually records those experiences from past experiences. Oh, this is this should be a good experience actually. I think we should go for this. So then the mind actually pulls in one direction. If the intelligence is not equipped properly with proper knowledge, spiritual knowledge, especially spiritual knowledge, then most of 99% of the cases, the intelligence just goes along with the mind, and then the passenger is in for a ride. He's in for a true, well, you can say adventure, but people going through life, with unruly mind and senses, when it's, it can really take you for a ride. It can take you from the heights in the material world to all the way to the bottom. And we've seen so many cases of that. So many people reach the top, and then suddenly a big scandal comes about, and then the whole thing, it's subverted. It's because of the unruly mind and the senses. Yeah, this is a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna gives a hierarchy. He says, Indriyani pranyahur indriyabhya paramanaha manasastu parabuddhir yu buddhe paratassaha. So he says that there is matter, and above matter is the senses, indriyani, and above senses is the mind, and above the mind is intelligence, and above the intelligence is the Atma. So this is the real hierarchy. So when this hierarchy is established, then the horses is under the control of the reins is under the control of the intelligence, and then the intelligence is under the control of the Atma. Then the passenger will have a very safe ride in the journey. But that's never. So what do you think in your own life? Is this hierarchy set up, established? No. Let's be honest, it's not. And this is where spiritual practice comes into play. Two things comes into play which will help us to establish this hierarchy is spiritual knowledge and spiritual practice. Spiritual knowledge will give the intelligence strength, and spiritual practice will give the Atma the strength, the willpower. So what are the two things? Two things to establish this hierarchy in our own lives. What do you need? Spiritual knowledge and spiritual practice. So these are like how you have two tracks. You have a railway track has two lines. So similarly, you need to have spiritual knowledge, and they have to go hand in hand. They have to go side by side for us to establish this hierarchy in our own lives. So that will give us the inner strength and the intelligence to actually control the mind and the senses.
So when you say spiritual practice, does it mean like always using intelligence to guide?
Well, spiritual practice in the sense that intelligence is there to guide. So we are reading books, spiritual texts. We can nourish our intelligence. But in spiritual practice, like meditation, mantra meditation, actually helps us to. It empowers the true Atma to actually, get back in charge of the unruly mind and senses and the intelligence. So, yeah. In fact, in Kali Yuga, you need a very powerful spiritual practice. Because Kali Yuga, this is the default mode. Everybody follows the default mode. of unruly mind, etc. So that is the default. This is the default mode. So you need a really powerful spiritual practice to strengthen the spirit inside. Spiritual practice is meant to strengthen the spirit inside. So you need a very powerful spiritual practice, and that powerful spiritual practice is mantra meditation. And in fact, it's said in the Vedas that in Kali Yuga, especially what works is mantra meditation. It's a powerful spiritual practice. It's like when there is a riot going on, you have to. There are different levels of responses, right? First, the police comes. They will do lathi charge, and then they'll fire, tear gas shells. But still, the riot mob is unruly, and then they threaten even the police. The police actually change the dress and then they will join the mob sometimes just to save their lives. Then when the mob really gets unruly, then what do you call? The police will not be able to handle. What do you call? You call the military. What is that? Yeah, the military force. And then they'll come with their guns and tanks, and then they'll order a curfew, and then they'll fire one shot, then everything will suddenly disperse. So similarly, in Kali Yuga, the mind is like an unruly mob. And when you're dealing with this unruly mob, you need a very powerful spiritual practice to actually take control of this unruly mob, which is the mind and the senses. And that powerful practice is mantra meditation. So this is the hierarchy Krishna gives. The senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, which are all material, part of the matter. And then there is the Atma, which is non-material, spiritual. So this is the decision-making framework we talked about. There is looks lovely, right? Nice cream. That's how the contemplation starts. And then the mind says, I have had this previous experience. You know what? I think we should go for it. That's the suggestion of the mind. This contemplation, and then these are the progressions. Krishna says, Dhyayato Vishyan Pumsam Sangashre Jupajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kama Krodha Vijayate Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha Sammoha Smriti Vibramaha Smriti Brahmshat Buddhi Naso Buddhi Nashat Pranashyati. So he gives a logical workflow of how step by step one actually starts from contemplation and finally loses himself to that indulgence. So starts with contemplation. Of course, this is a simple example, but there are bigger things in life. Starts with contemplation. From contemplation comes attachment, and from attachment comes strong desire to enjoy that particular object, and then comes bewilderment of memory, loss of intelligence, and one gives into that urge or that impulse, and then comes back to square one. Yeah. So this was while contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment to them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So this is that. It's just a bigger picture. So, any questions so far, or comments, reflections? I mean, it's quite a engineering inside, right? What goes on inside? In fact, this is called Vedic psychology. The psychology from the Bhagavad Gita.
Where is karma playing?
Yeah, we'll come to that in 2 sessions. So we'll have a separate topic for that karma. So we'll discuss it when we come to the topic.
Prabhuji, I had a general question, not directly related to this problem, but which agitates everybody's mind. We hear that Jivatma, that's our Atma, is part of Paramatma. And the mission of every Jivatma should be or would be to get back to the Paramatma, so that we don't go through the cycle of birth and death. Now, Jivatma, why does he send a part of him to undergo all this torture, the Dukhalaya, or in the birth and death? What is the reason?
We'll talk offline. So, yeah, we will talk during dinner time actually.
It's a question for
No. Yeah. Go ahead.
So you said mind is also a matter.
Mind is also
So it's
material.
not tangible, right? So
It's not tangible, it's subtle.
so it could subtle matter.
Subtle, yeah. But it's still material. It's subtle. It's not tangible to the gross eyes. But still it's material. Because it cannot exhibit consciousness on its own. Only the living force can exhibit consciousness, the symptoms of life. The mind can only feed off it.
So at time of death it freezes, like hibernation or something. Because it cannot exist without Atma, right?
At the time of death, it is the one that carries the Atma to the next body.
Oh yeah, okay, makes sense.
Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said like mantra meditation will help to control the mind, right?
Right.
How exactly that will help? Like say doing the mantra meditation?
That's a good point. So, I mean, in short, the question is, how does mantra meditation help to control the mind? So, the way mantra meditation works is that it connects us with the Paramatma. And when we are connected with something that's more powerful than our own self, then we also inherit those powers. And by that connection, then one will be able to easily control the mind. So, in essence, the answer is, it's not within our powers to control the mind, because we don't own the mind. We are not the creators of the mind. We are not a proprietor of the mind. So how can we claim that we can control the mind? You know, it's not an element that we have an understanding of, or we have any sense of. Forget about that we created it. So generally the sequence is that one who owns is a proprietor, and one who is a proprietor can control it. So Krishna says, all these elements are actually coming from me. They are my separated energies. So it's the divine person's separated energy. It's his energy actually, and so because it's his energy, he can control it. He cannot, because it's not our energy. We don't produce these energies. I mean, we cannot even control we cannot control anything in our life for that matter. I mean, we cannot control nature's call. We cannot control this body. We cannot control, we are not even aware of many things. We are not aware of our heartbeat. We are not aware of our blood circulation. We are not aware of our digestion. We are not even, what to speak of controlling? Somebody is controlling the heartbeat, somebody is controlling the blood circulation, somebody is controlling the digestion. You eat something and something comes out. And then suddenly you feel energized. It's unbelievable. This body is functioning on its own. When I say on its own, it's not working. Of course, there is some amount of control we have. We walk from here to there, we lift our hand and do this. But nature can also arrest that. If you get a paralytic attack, if you want to lift your hand, you cannot. So there is some amount of control that we can exercise, but then there are so many things that's beyond our control, right from things happening inside our body. And what to speak of the macro, at a microcosmic, at the macrocosmic level is this. What about the cosmic level? Things are just unbelievably, out of control from us. So who's controlling all these things? Of course, Bhagavad Gita has answers for all these things, but we'll come there. But then, in short, how mantra meditation helps us, because mantra meditation connects us with the source of everything. The source, the divine source. And when we are connected with the divine source, then we feel very empowered. And then, because of that empowerment, we are able to control the mind. Like, for example, this finger, right? This finger, if it's cut and it's it's disconnected from the body, then what is the value of that finger, the part of the body, right? There's no value for the body. But then when it's connected to the body, then it regains its position, and then it feels it's valuable, right? This finger becomes valuable when it's connected with the body. So similarly, like that. But we'll go into more details in the later sessions. Okay. Yeah.
So, gaining intelligence will make us happy, or going with just the mind will make us more happy? I feel like
well, happiness
man is the happiest person.
What is it?
Early man is the happiest person.
Early man.
He don't know about early.
He doesn't know about technology? Is that what you say? He doesn't know about Java, C++. That's why he's the happiest person.
I mean, he's not born with the intelligence what usually we all have about.
Well, we have a very different understanding of what early man is. How the Vedas talk about our glorious history. Our early man from the Vedas, from our history, are not people who are completely self-aware, who are very advanced spiritually, who led their life, perfectly in the material world, and also were spiritually perfected beings. So from our history, our early people were very advanced, both materially and spiritually. They knew how to live in harmony with the nature and be happy in this world, at the same time get out of the cycle of birth and death. So our early people were, at least from our history, they were very advanced spiritually and materially. So we'll stop there because it's yes.
So regarding reincarnation and taking rebirth, can we say that it's by the benevolent arrangement of the nature that we are made to forget our past life, so that we don't suffer in this life?
Yes, it's a benevolent nature. Otherwise we'll go crazy. Now I'll have to take care of my 54th life property that I have, which is being occupied by somebody else.
Can you talk about false ego a little bit more?
False ego is what binds us to false identity.
Just makes you believe things.
Yeah, this makes you believe that I am the center of the universe. And very soon, generally that's the feeling for people, when we reach adolescence, and then we're near college, we are like, we'll conquer the world. And then you get into workplace and you work for some time. And slowly, that yeah, slowly that that I'm not the controller, that there are people around who can control more. So that feeling sinks in, and then slowly, and then you get married. And then, around 60 to 70% of the illusion is gone right there. And then you have kids, 100% is gone after you have. Because, of course, we have family and everything, in the hopes of expanding our happiness and joy and everything. But very soon we'll realize, the kids who are born out of me, even they are not under my control. They have their own proclivities, inclination, and so on and so forth. So as the life goes on, you begin to realize, yes, that's.
So why is false ego not?
It's the subtlest of the element. Of the subtle body, there is also a gradation. Mind is subtle, intelligence is even more refined, but even more subtle than is the false ego.
Sometimes we see people have
Right. I mean, it's a huge false ego. Means ahankar means what? I am this. There's a false conception of the self. I am great. I am this. I am doing that. I'm this. So it's not, none of those things are reality. And what many times happens is life, sometimes pulls the carpet right under your feet, and then you fall down and with a big thud, and then there is a whole unraveling of shock, and there has to be a lot of work, introspection, what happened. And then life, the beauty of life is also that, it gives you enough situation and thing to slap your false ego hard. So, I mean, it's interesting, right, that we have this notion that I'm the center, but then the universe behaves in a way where it doesn't cooperate with each and every one of our desires or our wanting and everything. So it frustrates as a meditator, just to give us the indication that I am not in control, I am not the proprietor of anything here, and whatever follows after that.
So is pessimism and self-deprecation also a part of the
Very good point, very nice question actually. So just like how you have a false ego, there is also a true ego. In the sense, there is a definition of the true identity. So it's just not, self-deprecation and that's also artificial, because it's two sides of the same coin. There's two sides of the same coin. Thinking that I'm great, I'm all in all, and I'm the center here. That's one side of the coin. The other side is I'm nothing, and there's also other side of the coin. So that's also a play of the false ego only. But the Bhagavad Gita talks about how to establish ourselves in our true identity, the spiritual identity. That is the true, essential. I mean, if you want to call it, that's a true ego. My spiritual identity, my true self, that is my real identity, and that's true ego. Of course, Krishna defines it further also, but we'll go. I mean, apart from that, I'm a spiritual entity. Krishna also defines, Mamaiva Amsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Manashashtani Indriyani Prakritistani Karshati. He further defines, you are a spirit, but also what? You are part of the Supreme Spirit eternally. Mamaiva Amsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Krishna says all the living entities are eternally my part and parcels. This is in the 15th chapter. But we will talk more about all those things.
Could you talk more about maybe next time about the mantra meditation? And I'm not very clear about how it actually affects.
Sure, we'll do a small practice. In fact, there are more slides, but we'll continue next week. So we'll do a small practice of the mantra meditation. Of course, what we will do is we will chant this mantra Om. So there are many mantras, all the mantras have different effect on us. We will introduce the other mantras over the next few weeks, but for today we'll just chant on this mantra Om. And Om, of course, is it's popular, it's a universal mantra which actually brings about more centering of the self and self-awareness. So, in fact, over a prolonged period of time, if you chant Om, it brings about the realization of the self. That's one of the effects of chanting the mantra Om. But we'll also discuss other mantras. We'll also discuss about the Maha Mantra in the coming sessions, which is the mantra of all the mantras. So, you can, sit straight, you can close your eyes or keep it open. And then